Morning, everybody. It's Andrew Deering, AD on Better People, Better Business, and I am stoked today to have someone I consider not just an amazing individual and doing great work in the business community, but also a friend. Jane Anderson. Morning, Jane.
Good morning. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited, Andrew.
Yes, ditto. I can't. I'll get to that in a sec. Just for some people to give some context. And just if you haven't heard of Jane, what have you been living under a rock? But anyway, seriously, Jane is the guest today, and she's a strategic communication expert. She's worked with over 100,000 people on improving their influence in their businesses and their careers, which is a fairly significant number. She's got clients like Virgin Australia, Lego, Ikea, Rio Tinto, and BlueScope Steel. She's had the opportunity to interview people such as Seth Godin on her podcast, The Jane Anderson Show. And if you don't know who that is, again, worth having a look because he's an amazing individual as well. Jane's been featured in Forbes, Sydney Morning Herald, The Age, Sky Business News, and on Channel 7's Sunrise. Jane was recently voted the top 3 branding experts globally and has won more than 25 awards for marketing, sales, and communications. She's the author of 9 books, including her upcoming book, Exceptionality, How to Build a Brand That Is Wildly Unique and World-Class. So, again, welcome, Jane.
Thanks, Andrew.
And a little anecdotal piece for people listening. The reason I'm doing the kind of work we do these days, I would give a big thank you and acknowledgement to Jane. I remember sitting many years ago, I won't say how many, but a while back, chatting with Jane. And Jane was doing some work in an organisation I worked for. And Jane was coming in and doing some great work with that business. And her questions are, why are you doing this? Why are you not doing this yourself out there in, consulting land, out there in thought leader world? Why are you not doing this? And that started the chain reaction of thinking and events. And here we are. So thanks, Jane. And for those people who appreciate this podcast, they thank you as well.
Oh, that's my pleasure. I feel so fortunate to be on. We have a long history and we go back a long way. So, I'm so thrilled that we got to have that opportunity to work together years ago. Even though you might not have stayed in my training room very long, you were like one of my toughest participants ever. Yeah. And but had incredible admiration for you and your creativity and your vision. I could see, despite, I think we were doing some productivity training back then with your team and but being able to see this vision that you had, I remember being so inspired. And I don't know if you've been deliberately trying to distract me so that I didn't try to get you to finish the course, but I left really inspired. And I think, when you're out working with people, we're all out working with our clients and you see people in your travels that you go, you know what, I reckon there's more in this for someone like you. You were so, and you continue to be so leading edge in your thinking. It was, so obvious for us it's no wonder we're still buddies and able to catch up all those years later and say, come do this. This will be fun.
Yes, absolutely. And it's, thank you, Jane. And similarly, it's been an amazing journey to watch way back from there and what you've done. And let's just examples for people with that little brief intro. That's a lovely intro, but there's so much more, which I think we'll go digging into or swimming through today. It's humbling and lovely to have you here. So, Jane, let me start. A bunch of people out there listening who are really after this, I think, listen to this podcast, partly because we talk pretty openly and honestly, and secondly, because for them, the title of Better People, Better Business resonates.
Yes.
And I just, without giving any more than that, I'd love to hear what your thoughts are when you hear that string of words. What sparks in your head?
So I think of a couple of things. I think there's a Better People, Better Business in terms of the continuous improvement side, which, we have an obsession around and trying to help people become the best versions of themselves. And if they can do that, then businesses become the best versions of themselves. But I think when I'm working with clients, I look at it as in, how can we make sure that you are telling the right message so that you are positioned as better than the competition? So I think one of the things that happens, and what I love about this phrase is, one of the things that happens is we can get caught up in this imposter syndrome, inertia of trying to be the best. And so we go, oh, well, if I've got to go out, I'm going to go out and market myself. I'm going to position myself as the best. But the reality is we don't have to be the best. We just got to be better than the competition. So I think there's, if I'm working with clients, certainly there's around the continuous improvement and trying to be better every day. But there's an identity piece that comes with that when I'm helping people to position and market themselves, is that when they're looking and comparing, well, if I'm going to work with this leadership expert versus you, or I'm going to work with this finance company over you, or whatever they might be, is what is it that's going to make the client look at both those, the comparison of those two things, and go, this one's a better fit for us. I think we should work with them. So, yeah, that's what I reckon.
That's good. And it is that you've hit on the conversation that happens in nearly every one of these, the subtlety between, or not so subtle, between better and best. Right. I think people have this, again, the clients I work with and conversations we have, and it sounds like it's the same in your world, which is no surprise because we're human beings. People always wanting to be best, and it's always saddens me. Let's talk about being better, because best is a really ill-defined and often hard to find, ill-defined, and or a ceiling. And if you get there, what's next?
Yeah, that's right.
As you said, better's the ladder. It just keeps on stretching up as far as you choose to take it. Yeah, which is powerful. So jump a bunch of different things just popped up through that, but so a lot of the work you do is with individuals, and as you said, helping them position. I love for people who are out there who haven't had the luck that I've had in knowing you. What kind of work is that? Like, what is the work you're doing? What are you focusing on right now?
Yeah, positioning is a funny word, isn't it? It's like, so do I stand like this or like this? So positioning is about the space that you hold in your customer's mind. What do they, how do they have you categorized, and how do they think of you? And I've spent the last 20 plus years helping people to really work out who they are and their identity. What are the strengths they bring? What are the activities that they do to cultivate that identity? So you were a victim of that in my productivity training all those years ago. And what are the cadence, habits, and routines that actually cultivate that identity? And then as a result, then we say, okay, well, that forms what I believe is an exceptional brand. So it's not just about, so whilst I came from personal branding, and I really came from a marketing and helping people brand position themselves, leaders, training and development, all that sort of stuff. But what happened over time is that today now is really working on the intersection of identity and productivity, and the intersection of those two things, because productivity was the thing that I really struggled with. And by the time I met you, I had come into working with an organisation that was the world leaders in productivity, and that was because I had my own struggles, and realised that actually an identity is cultivated through really strong cadence and habits and routines that create continuous improvement. So today my real obsession, even though I've written the books on personal branding, I'll still obsess around that all the time. But a personal brand isn't like something like you go, okay, here's your stamp, there's your personal brand, good for you. It's okay, well, how do we continue to evolve it so that it becomes better, and so that it actually becomes exceptional, that it becomes something that people think is not just extraordinary. Extraordinary is, okay, it's different, but exceptional is that it continues to evolve because it's becoming better all the time.
That's powerful. And the positioning thing, what strikes me there is when we talk about better people, better business, that understanding of your positioning is really important. And I can almost hear a few people here going, yeah, that's probably for those people who are out there doing stuff and LinkedIn and, business, they're selling their wares or they're flashing their stuff. Like, that's for them. Why do I care? Like, I'm in an organization, whether I'm a senior leader or not, or a leader or even on the floor, whatever level they're sitting, they're kind of going, so Jane can't be talking to me, can she? Surely. Yeah. Surely, because positioning won't matter to me, will it?
And I didn't think so either, but I'll share a story with you. So back when I was working with a large retail organisation, 10,000 plus staff. I'd just taken on the role as the head of capability for the organisation, and I was liaising with the CEO of one of the brands. It had 5 brands at the time, and I struggled for a long time to get him to really listen to what I was trying to do with his team, and I was trying to align their training and get him on board. He always wanted to kind of do his own thing. And after a while, I realised that we got about probably 8 months down the track. I just kept chipping away, and I just thought, I'm going to win this guy over, because it's not just about him, it actually benefits the whole organisation. Mm-hmm. And he eventually said to me one day, he said, you know what, Jane? He said, I had you pinned, or I had you pigeonholed in terms of you're that annoying L&D person, because that's who I had to deal with, who was your predecessor. But you're not like that at all. What you're actually trying to do is you have actually got my best interests in mind. You're not trying to make things worse for me. You're trying to make them better. Mm. And so my lesson in positioning was that we often inherit sometimes a position in an organisation if you've moved into a role, because people don't just connect the relationships with that human being, they connect it with the title. Mm. And so they go, oh, you're one of those annoying L&D people, which was what the brand that I had. I didn't even make that brand. I'm like, I just walked in the door. But I had inherited a positioning that was hurting not only me, but it was hurting the business. It was hurting his business. And it takes time to reposition so that you can build trust and get the influence that you're trying to get to create the change. And it can work. But I think for the average person who might be sitting here, if you're a leader in an organization, or maybe you're a business owner, or, this isn't just about, building brands and personal brands who have businesses as brands. This is as leaders. I'm working with a university at the moment with some of their graduates. They're coming out. It doesn't matter where you are. We all have a brand, whether we like it or not. The question is are you positioned to get the influence and in your role that you're really needing to get? Because maybe you might be stuck in the situation I was, and how do you reposition yourself to get that trust, influence, and change?
Yeah, and I think it's really good. Thank you. And if you feel you aren't stuck in that position, you should probably have a good look, because you may not be looking hard enough, because that you are spot on with that pigeonholing, where roles, titles, etc., they carry a stigma and a story. Sometimes it's useful, sometimes it's not. And as we often say, it's like that. It's a parallel. This, what I'm going through my head, is a positioning piece is a parallel thing to the culture conversation we can talk about. There's always there's a culture always being formed. Whether you have a choice of whether you're active in managing and leading that or not is your choice. Positioning, your brand is always being formed, whether you're conscious of it or not. And how do you take active control of that and understand how to manage that a little bit better? It sounds
spot on. And as a leader, even helping your own team identify that. So it could be the team's brand. Yeah. I was finding, for myself, it wasn't just my personal brand. It was actually the learning and development team brand that was affected as well. So you've sometimes got to also, as a leader, think about what are the personal brands and the team brand, particularly if you're trying to influence that change too.
Yeah, it's powerful. So people, again, I'm going to jump into the seat of someone sitting there listening to this, possibly driving to work or going for a walk or whatever where they find themselves. And hello again, all you people. What kind of things should people be mindful of? Mary, Bob, whoever it is sitting there kind of going, okay, I kind of get it now. There is this brand, and I'm probably not really thinking about it a whole lot. Now, the first thing I'd say is there's a cracking bunch of books that you've written, and absolutely go janeanderson.com and have a look, and or Google it, find it, go and buy some. I think you'll learn a bunch of stuff, and I have read them myself. Some are sitting over there in the pile of books.
You're probably featured in a couple of them. I think there's probably a few stories in there.
Problem children normally get into books, so that's fair. And I think there was. Yes, anyway, yes. But for those folk who are, what's a couple of practical things that, if they're going to start thinking about this positioning thing, it's because, again, it can be quite overwhelming.
Yeah.
Because you go, do I have to dress a certain way? Do I have to speak a certain way? Do I have to, well, wait, hang on a minute, because there's also a lot of nonsense out there. Like the work you do I think is beautiful and clean around positioning, and it understands the person and the human in the middle of it.
Yes.
But if I just looked for positioning or branding, there's a lot of nonsense out there.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of people banging on with a lot of rubbish.
Yes.
That is way less useful and expensive, painful. Almost have to reinvent yourself when I think the work you do is not about reinventing yourself, but it's about discovering yourself and putting yourself in a place where it can be seen.
Yes.
Very different space.
Yeah. And in a comfort level of, we don't, I think sometimes people, talk about that. They think that when I'm helping them build a brand, it's all about visibility. It's, oh my God, she's going to make me do TikTok and I'm going to have to do these dancing videos. And it's like, oh no. In fact, there's some people that we work with that we say, you don't actually even need social media whatsoever.
So, just put my hand up for people in the back and go, that must be me. No, it isn't. So I'm sure Jane has heard that from me many times. Do I really have to do that?
Yeah.
Yes, Andrew.
And it's not always, you don't always necessarily, it's not always the case. In fact, I reckon I've got a book in me that's how to build a business without social media at some stage. So it doesn't always necessarily have to be social media platforms and things. And it also doesn't necessarily have to be forever as well. So because brands evolve and change and communities build and tribes build. So I reckon, and before I get into answering that, I'll share an example. If we look at, I was just reading this morning, I follow the Royals quite a bit not because I'm a big Royals fan, but because it's one of the most fascinating brands and like human being type brands. It's a business, if you like, or an organisation, but they're a very strong and powerful individual personal brands within there. Some well-liked, some not.
Less so, yeah.
But I think if you look at, say, people like Harry and Meghan at the moment, so the narrative of the brand, they've left the royal family, they've gone out and started, the Sussex brand. And the challenge that's happening is that the brand that's being built, or the conversation is, let's whinge about the royal family and complain. Now, the problem is that they're I don't know what kind of advice they're getting, or in my opinion is that they sound a little bit like sport brats. like, hang on, you've just come up in this, one of the world's wealthiest families, and dad's given me a few $1 million, but that's not enough for my security detail. So, it's a little bit hard for people to connect with. And if they're saying that they want to step out of the royal family and to be able to build a brand, that they need some kind of purpose and meaning, not just build a brand about whinging about the royal family, as much as that might sell newspapers, books, whatever. It's actually not the brand that I think that maybe they had in mind, but it's kind of going this way. So it's a good lesson for us. In terms of when I'm helping people build a brand, there's 3 things I look for. The first one is clarity, being really clear about your own strengths, who you are, who you serve, so where they live. And so the big question is who in the clarity statement. Who am I and who do I serve? And what is my message? They're probably the real things around clarity. The second one is communication, and communication is about making a conscious choice and being very strategic about the platforms that I have to communicate that message. So for one person, it could be, I've got to redo a LinkedIn profile, we've got to update a website, that kind of stuff. If you're a leader in an organisation, if I'm working with a CEO, I might go and have a look at their positioning in the organisation, or they're not getting respect or influence or whatever. And I might go and look at what are the meetings they're attending? Who are they meeting with? Have they actually they're not getting the influence because the meetings and the people they're meeting with are too reactive. They're not proactive meetings. It might be that if I look at the website, the CEO's profile is the one that's lowest on the website. They're hard to find. It might be that they're not speaking at the right conferences or events? Do we actually need to get a strategy together for them to be meeting with, reaching out to meeting planners and conference organisers? We need perhaps some kind of collateral, speaking kit, show reel, or, it might be something like that, not necessarily social media strategy. So making a really conscious choice based on the clarity, who am I, who do I serve, and the goals that you're trying to achieve. Is it a revenue goal? Is it getting your next job? What is that? The communication channel, if it's getting your next role, is, moving from a senior leader or middle manager into a senior executive role. What are the communication channels? Okay, I've got to talk to recruiters. They need collateral, resumes, cover letters, selection criteria, LinkedIn profiles, a strategic networking type approach, mentors, whatever. So that's the communication strategy for something like that. So it's clarity, communication. And the third one, and you touched on it, which is control. And I love that you said active control, because this is not control as in being, controlling or a control freak.
Yeah.
It's about knowing there's two things that are part of control. One is that knowing what to say no to and what you're saying yes to. So it's making conscious choices about where your visibility is, those types of things, where your time is spent. So it's how you say no. And the other thing is how you respond to crisis. So when things go wrong, things don't go to plan, are you the type of person who panics? Do you, do you get angry? Do you get frustrated? Do you see it as an opportunity? Do you, any of those things? So when control is all about how you respond. So, and that's what builds trust, that builds authenticity, because you can have all the clarity and communication in the world, but when things go wrong, if that's not congruent with those other two things, then, we're going to lose trust in the brand. So if someone's got a business, for example, I think about retail. I spent many years in retail. I worked for the Mathers family and Sir Robert Mathers for 15 years. And, a big part of that was when I worked with the import store, was if people had a bad product, if something was falling apart, or, the shoe was faulty or something that's our opportunity to respond and rebuild trust in the brand, not see a customer coming in and run away because I don't want to deal with them because we're going to end up in conflict. Is, oh, here's an opportunity. How can I help this person? My job is to rebuild trust in our brand in this very moment. So clarity, communication, and control.
Yeah, nice. It's a cracking way to answer it. It's probably for people, there was a lot in that. There's probably about a minute and a half. Feel free to press rewind about now and have a listen to that, and grab your notebook, because I think there's some gold in there. I know there's some gold in there. And the 3 points: clarity, communication, and control. And I think that the other piece that was beautiful, there's all these other words which I think the listeners will resonate with, that it's important to getting more and more important and talked about more and more, things like trust and authenticity. And I think it's a really important reflection that the work you're doing with people and helping them understand the work that they do themselves with you is very much around finding that authentic self.
Yes.
Brett, again, like I keep coming back to this, I think it's really important, especially better people, better business lens. There's so many people, it's going to sound terrible, but we've all heard the statement, putting lipstick on the pig.
Yes.
It's so many people, it feels like there's this positioning thing where you got wax and lippy on and off you go. It's like, it's not about that.
No.
It's about being authentic.
Yes.
Like if I turn up, as you know, this is me all dressed up today. And a lot of the time it's the black T-shirt and casual trousers. That's who I am.
Yes.
And I can meet CEOs, right down to whoever, and that's who I am.
Yes.
And the funny thing is, for me, originally I thought, people won't accept you when you turn up like that. You've got to wear a suit and tie. It's all up here. And the piece that was novel was from a branding and positioning perspective. When I was uncomfortable, they read that I'm uncomfortable. I'm not authentic in that moment.
Yes.
Trust is harder to build. It's that simple.
Yes.
So I think there's that piece that you're talking to there, and it's important for people to, my little pickup from that and the things I've learned from you is understanding the who that you want to be, not just the who is your client.
Yes.
But it's the who you want to be.
Yes.
And who you are.
Yes.
That's
I love
been something
that.
I've learned.
Yeah, because quite often we can focus on who we've been, and that's important. There's a history that we all have. There's a credibility that we all have based on the experiences and the relationships we've built and all those sorts of things. But if we don't stop and make that conscious choice about, well, who am I now and where am I trying to go? That clarity is I'm going to be stuck. I'm going to feel like, well, hopefully my work will just speak for me. Hopefully opportunities will come my way. Hopefully I'll just do a good job. But unfortunately, people are so busy in their own worlds, they just don't see those things. So that's part of it, but it's not, you have to actually put yourself out there and take those next steps.
Yeah, the word that's sitting in the back of my head as you're talking, it's that deliberateness.
Yes.
And I think that's the piece. People who you have the opportunity to work with, and those people who have the opportunity to work with you, you're helping them get deliberate.
Yes, absolutely.
Let's not just hope that stuff will happen. Let's not just hope that things will come. Let's not just hope that whatever.
Yes.
Let's actually get deliberate. Let's talk about the work. One of the other words you talked about in there, which is, I know, one of your favourites, I've certainly heard it many times, is collateral.
Yes.
It's so the positioning and the branding, and how do you support that? Obviously, there's the authentic self, and you do a bunch of work in helping people do that. And there's this collateral piece. And when we talk about collateral, when do you talk about that? What do you talk about in that space? What does that mean for people?
Yeah. Well, there's a great quote, and I think Jeff Bezos said, your personal brand is what people talk about when you're not in the room. And that can feel like, okay, well, that makes sense how people are talking about me. Then the question is if you're not in that room, what is representing you when you're not there? And so that means websites. That means if you're in your own practice, it might mean, okay, well, I've got to create some research and publish it in a white paper. I might have to write a book, which you've done, which is fantastic.
With your help, I will happily tell everybody.
With my whip cracking, most people will say that. With Jane going, how many words? How many words are you up to?
Yes, come on, hurry up. Get moving.
So we need something to talk for us, and we need something to travel. So because there are people out there who are fans of yours. There are people out there that they say they've come out of a meeting with Andrew and I just had this amazing meeting with Andrew. He talked about blah, 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 and this and that. If we can help them, the collateral, I think sometimes we can think, the collateral's all about me and I'm such a rock star. And so, but if you can have a mindset of service, the reason why I'm creating this document is to help somebody else have a conversation, is because quite often we know that working with organisations, if you're in the consulting space, you've got 5 to 7 people-ish involved in a decision to work with you. If it's an individual, you might be a husband, a wife, a partner, or there's someone else possibly involved in that conversation. So we need collateral. And a big part of that collateral at the moment is often video. So, and asynchronous communication. So it might be a voice message. It might be a video on the phone just saying, hey, how you going? Just wanted to check in. How you doing? Blah, blah. Or if it's collateral marketing it could be walking through a document for your senior leaders team. And maybe you're doing that through a video, through a 2 to 3 minute thing, because, people need you to translate what is happening. So if we've got documents like that show the translation that they understand, you're going to just be so much, I just believe it's just being easy to work with. If you can be easy to work with and people don't have to think too hard, then you can put those documents in front of them and they go, oh, here's what he said. Yep, that's what we want. Sounds great.
Yeah.
Done.
Spot on. It just a conversation 2 weeks ago. I was over in Perth.
Right.
Talking to a potential client.
Mm-hmm.
And I know the individual because we've done work before. So there's that familiarity, which is good. But the thing, talking with her this week, and she was saying, like, for her to, she's an EGM, talking to her peer COO. She's like, I'm having that conversation. I'm going to be taking your brochure. That was fantastic, because I can go and talk him through that model that you talked us through.
Right.
And again, I think that's the other little subtlety of this is, things like the models, and it gives people something to hang on to. So it's another example of the collateral isn't just a shiny brochure per se. Again, people will often say, got one sitting here, people will often kind of say, hey, there's a lot of content here that you're giving away, all these models and stuff. Yep. I go, well, maybe. And this is something I learned from you, Jane. Like, there's this piece where so many people want to hang on to it as if it's,
I know, right?
It's theirs. And I kind of go, well, first of all, there's a thing that I sort of argue that it's not. You're just a steward of it for the moment.
Right.
But nonetheless, even if you don't want to choose that, it's this piece of, but for her to be able to understand it, to talk to her peers and or leadership, to get advocacy, I don't even have to be in the room, because as one example, this collateral spoke for me.
Yes.
I don't have to be there. I don't have to fly back to Perth and have a chat. I don't have to do a Zoom meeting.
That's right.
She is able to talk through that piece, and it's so powerful. And I think, again, better people, better business. If you don't have some of this stuff, you're only one voice. Like, I have dozens of these, hundreds of these things floating around in different places. There's all these voices talking for me.
That's it. And they do the heavy lifting for you, so that when you do go to those meetings, you can just be present to what is the next step, or you're getting closer to whatever the conversation actually really needs to get to, because that's been done. It's in front of people. You can reference if you need to. And, I just find that's often the biggest gap. When we hit COVID, I launched a cut-through collateral program, as you know, and it was really because I went, okay, if we're going to be spending this amount of time in lockdown and isolation, people need something to focus on. What's the number one thing that most people seem to be missing, that if they could have this time to create something that would create the greatest leverage for them in their personal brands and their practices, what would it be? And collateral. So it's like, let's get in and create some stuff. Let's not look back on the last 9 weeks and go, geez, I probably shouldn't have sat watching Netflix for the last 2 months.
Not for the whole time anyway. And it's powerful. It's and again, to use the other word you use there, it's around service. If you believe your work is in service to others, which, if you're running a business, if you're in a business, if you've got a job, if you're not thinking that way, I'd suggest it's an opportunity to start thinking that way.
Yes.
I don't care whether you're whatever level, doesn't matter. I'm not going to pick different types of roles to be discriminatory that way. Doesn't matter. You're in service to someone somewhere, and that's a really interesting frame. And for a better business, better people, better business, things like collaterals allow you to be in service way beyond you. Again, the voices that speak when you're not there.
And how can I make this better for my customer? I want to make their life better and easier with these things, because it helps them to get the influence they're trying to get.
Yep. And if someone pinches stuff, using the word there, good, whatever.
Go for it.
I'm pretty certain that if someone tried to be Jane Anderson's stuff, look, good luck to them, but they'll never be Jane Anderson. If someone tries to do the work we do, and again, good luck to them, but they'll never know, because they weren't a part of the creation of. They can never quite get to the same depth and detail.
No.
It's what's the old saying? If you hold it like this, it owns you, and if you hold it like that, you own it. It's the same stuff with.
That's right.
With a lot of the positioning and branding, it also is, I suspect, and I'll ask you this question. I'm thinking that when you show up in that way, people experience you in a much more positive manner. You're not like, it's not like the Grinch or it's the fellow from Christmas, the folky old Ebenezer Scrooge showing up at the door saying, "Hey, I'd like to do work with you, but here's the brochure. I'll show it to you, but I'm
that's right.
I need to hang on to that. Sorry."
Yeah. Look, I think a big part of creating what I think is a really exceptional brand is about abundance and generosity, and knowing that you have an infinite amount of ideas, things in your mind. There's so much going on in here. And if you're continuing to evolve the thinking, then your job is just to, like you said, is you're the vehicle to keep it coming. If I'm seeing things like TM, like trademarks on programs and names and all that sort of stuff, those sorts of things, I can understand sometimes, but more often than not, I go, oh, there's a little bit of scarcity mindset sometimes happening, because I'm putting TM on that because that's my program and I named that, and I'm going to take people to court if they copy my stuff and all that sort of thing. And that energy can be so much better spent over on, what, I'm here to help, I'm here to serve. Of course, we want people ideally to be referencing our stuff, and there may be times where they step over the line. But if you can really focus on, well, you know what, I'm just going to be generous. And I know for my own practice that has come back to me, multiple tenfold in terms of just be generous, because you know what, they may come back, they may not, but I think that's a good reputation around a brand to have, because I think, absolutely. And people can sometimes worry that, well, aren't I devaluing my brand, by being too generous? I go, well, you got a pricing problem in that case. So, you want to price well that you can give extra time, extra effort, extra resources, whatever. It only becomes a problem if your pricing's wrong.
And if you are constantly free.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
I think that's the important piece, understanding the better business side of stuff. It is about understanding your pricing. It is understanding about your value.
That's right.
And becoming better at understanding that, so that you are able to have, again, better conversations to do deals. And because if you're good at what you do,
yes, people
will want to buy you. They just do.
That's right.
And they'll buy your help.
Yes.
That's good. And there's so many. I'm just right as I go along, Jane, I write little notes and I go, so many conversations. One of the things that I think, through that whole piece of conversation, and I'll drag it back to because it's all in line. It's all definitely synchronous with better people, better business. One of the things you touched on, I think, is it's about being better, and you said at the beginning, better is about continuous improvement. It's that idea of sometimes, even if I use another word, being a little experimental, being a little brave, throwing caution to the wind. And you talked there about some really clever ideas around videos, et cetera, et cetera. What are you seeing happening out there? Because the other thing I think that I see a lot of is people really still banging away an email. It's kind of that they've got this one mode of conversation, yes, and it's email. Yep. And it's, to me, it is, none of us like it. I don't think anyone says I love email. It is a dangerous, brutal, blunt object.
Yes.
To be honest, nowadays, a lot of emails I write that might be a little bit more, if I can't get in a conversation with the person, I'll write and say, hey, I'm writing this email, but can I ask you to put your rose-coloured glasses on? This is written with best of intent. Yes. And I'd like to have a conversation about it. So, because I also know this is a really awkward way of communicating. But here goes. What kind of things are happening out there around? Because I think this better business part is there's some tech, and I know you are always way across this stuff, way before most people. What's going on out there? How should people be communicating if they want to demonstrate that they are better,
Yeah, so I reckon what I'm seeing, what I'm noticing is the challenge that large organisations have around to be better in their communication, particularly for remote teams. So if we look at, so yourself and myself, I've been running remote teams for the last, 12 years. And what I noticed, so I've been doing a bit of this work in organisations as well. So I'm an Asana certified pro. I love Asana. There's plenty of other. I'm not precious about what people use. But Asana is the one that I like the most, because what I find...
What is Asana? Just because there's a bunch of people probably have no idea.
Clarify. Sorry.
Yep,
so
right.
Yes. So for those, if you use using some kind of project management type platform that people can communicate on. So there's things like, Teamwork, there's Asana, there's Monday.com, there's all those sorts of things. And I think they're built for really agile kind of organizations that are, what I've noticed is that for those who, because I do a lot of work with consulting firms, is that the communication stays a lot in some of those systems as opposed to email. And email is really gets used for external communication for dealing with clients. So that's really the ideal. What I find when I'm working with some organizations, particularly going through this remote working, is that they're having to work asynchronously. They need platforms where they have got the biggest challenge. I was on the growth faculty session the other day with Jim Collins, and asked the question, what do you think is the number one challenge building a remote workforce? And the number one thing that came up was accountability. And so what's happening is, because we don't necessarily see people, we forget. And so we're constantly having to chase up, how did you go with this? Did this get done? Where's that up to? So I think the challenge, and this is where it comes into strategic communication, where it's not just marketing or all those things, it's actually our internal comms and how we work, stay connected, and become better, is we actually need to look at, well, what are we actually going to use to make sure the work is not only visible, so we've got visibility of the work, but we also have the accountability to make sure that people can see what's on their plates, that they actually, that things aren't getting lost. So what I've noticed is I've implemented Asana in some organisations here in Brisbane, a big local city council here. That was a challenge, because just to get them...
Herding cats comes to mind.
Herding cats, but they did super well, because they were really motivated to make it work, because they knew there was a massive problem and everybody had great buy-in. But for those organisations I'm working mostly with, if they're consulting firms and working with offshore teams and things like that, this is the thing that is trying to keep it connected, and therefore that ultimately results in the delivery and the service for the customer, and that's what builds the brand. So I think the thing I'm seeing the most is, how do we communicate, and how do we keep accountable and keep work visible, so that we aren't losing or feeling the effects as much. Then as a result, reduces the amount of email, and all we're really doing. So even in my own personal email is really just dealing with external people who are not in our systems. It makes life so much easier. I don't know if you find that.
Yeah, yes. And I think that's one of the pieces in my team and my business. We're still seeking to improve, because how do you get visible? Because visibility, clear accountability, making it visible, just takes a whole bunch of conversations out that don't need to be had, and you can spend a stack of time feeling like you're having the same conversation every day. I remember a frame that, it's experience. People say, and it's probably the same thing here, we don't seem to learn. And you often see people who have 30 years of experience, but it's 30 years of 1 year of experience. 30 times 1 year. They actually don't have 30 years. I think some of the times in businesses, we aren't learning. So we might be 10 years in business, but it's the same 10 years. You keep repeating the same stuff.
Right.
How do you grow and learn? How do you shift and do more? How do you every year incrementally getting better and doing things differently? That tool, that Asana tool, and it's a great product. And again, call out there for people who are listening, if you need help, that is one of Jane's spaces that she can play with you to help you get it better. And I use the word play because working with Jane is that light, playful kind of thing. Actually, it's fun. It's not just meh. Sometimes you get an IT company come in and go, yes, we can crunch, bang, smash, and you just walk away thinking that just hurt. And I'm not sure we got valued. I really don't know what happened there versus the human side of things. Agreed. I'm going to jump sideways really hard because I'm also mindful we're getting close to time. And I think it's a really important thing, something you taught me, and I've never forgotten it. And it's a man. I think he's a man. I'm pretty certain it wasn't a terribly stereotypical decision on my behalf, but Dunbar. Yeah, one of the things Dunbar. And
Robin Dunbar. Yes.
Yeah. So this is something I learned from you, and I think really important if I go to this heart of better people, better business. Realizing that you don't have to be all things to all people, and you don't, because again, I think people out there in businesses and even themselves are kind of going, well, I need to impress everybody, don't I? Everyone, my nephews everywhere. I've got to boil the ocean, Jane.
That's right, boil the ocean. That's a good metaphor. I like it.
And we do it lots, and I did it. Yeah. Who's your client? Well, that's everyone, isn't it? Slow down, Tiger. Slow down a little bit.
Yeah.
I'm really interested to get your wisdom on, because I think it'll help people. And this is probably a focus particularly around business and people who are running businesses. But please don't, if you're listening, please don't just turn off, because thinking this way also helps you understand from a career perspective equally 100%. So. Like, this has been probably stolen by the small business or business community as a thing, and it certainly isn't just for them. It's for everybody who holds or does work, full stop. And I'm going to stop. I'm just going to let you espouse wisdom as you do in this space.
Well, for those, if you've heard me speak, you'll go, here she goes about Robin Dunbar. I do talk a lot about Robin Dunbar. But this was life-changing for me when I heard it. So the person I had to stand on the shoulders of giants, and which is why I happily share it with anyone, because I wish I knew this years ago. So and I'm standing on the shoulders of giants with Robin Dunbar, and of course the wonderful Matt Church, who put the thought leaders and consulting spin on it. So so Robin Dunbar is a social anthropologist, and he wrote the book "How Many Friends Does One Person Need?" is his landmark text. He's done a number of TEDx talks, and so you can jump online and have a look. But what he did was he essentially went to all these different countries on continents around the world, and he looked at, well, why is it that some Indigenous tribes in Australia still are around? Like, if we look at then African tribes, and we look at others in Native American tribes, like his question was why have some of those tribes died out and why have some survived? And he ultimately came up with the numbers, or these metrics, to identify that what's the likelihood of that tribe surviving. And the number that he came up are Dunbar's numbers. So the peak number that he came up with was 150. We have enough bandwidth at a personal level to manage about 150 people, 150 relationships. Now, within that, there is a core group of sort of about 15 people, where he said, you as the tribal leader or the community elder, you have a panel, or if you like, tribal elders, if you like, who are sort of the people around you who are your advisors, if you like. And I think that once I realized that, because you're right, what happens is when you're starting in your business, you're not really sure. You've got no database, perhaps. You're just putting everything out there and see what happens. But over time, as people start to buy in and people start to work with you, is that you start to realize, actually, and there's a distraction that happens with social media, going, oh, I know you need help, but I'm over here doing my TikTok video and I'll get back to you. I'll just go do this. And you're like, hold on, this poor person here, get back over there. Get back. Yep. Stop the bloody TikTok video. Get back over to this person, because this person values you. They have paid for your services possibly in the past. And in fact, the research tells us that if we nurture and look after those people, particularly the people who've bought from you in the past, they typically will spend about 50% more than anybody else. So what happens is, I think, as we're building brands, is there is a massive distraction that comes with social media and the things that we think are brand building. And I really think we need to stop and go. And so that's where I actually start. When I first work with people, my first question is, tell me about your customers. Tell me about the people you've been working with. Tell me about how many of those. Oh, but I've got, 10,000 on Instagram, and I've got, no, it's not the question. The question I've got is, pull out the list of the people who have bought from you previously and who you are currently nurturing and looking after. It's a very different conversation. And, then we can talk about content and all those things. But sometimes if they've been doing a good job of that, we actually don't even need social media and all those other things at all. So, yeah. So, yeah, I'm glad that we got to talk about that, because it really is life-changing for a lot of business owners. Yeah,
it certainly was for me. And I think to repeat that, and it is a story that I think we get told that is nonsense and has no grounding. You need thousands, millions. You need to touch everybody and hopefully one of them, versus realizing to use that number 150.
Yeah.
And you don't have to try and start with 10 and then go to 20, then go to 30 and go to 50. Like, grow it.
Yes.
Grow it with the deliberateness around this is my tribe, community, whichever language you choose to use. But these are my people, and these people. And when you think about it, I know this is one of the things Seth Godin talks to us, to you, around if you have that even 50 people, 150 is beautiful, and that's the work to get to. But if you even have the 50 people, that's enough to keep your business ticking over just fine.
It really is.
And I suspect, even from my experiences, having 10 or 15 great advocates is also enough to keep your business ticking over just fine. Don't try to be everything to everyone.
Yeah, we're not trying to be Brene Brown and have a Netflix show and, all that sort of stuff. There is plenty there in these small amounts. You just, you might even, you might even write a book for, I wrote this book for 10 people. And so this is a medical interviews program that I used to run. This is my last year of doing it. But there's 10 people that I typically would work with each year. The last few years have been 5. But previous to that, the amount of doctors that get an interview, this book is written for doctors to get onto specialty training programs. Every year there's only about 50 odd people who actually get an interview for a specialty. I do no marketing. I do no advertising. It is all referral because of this book, and they fill up my calendar every year for 6 months. And so there's no social media. You'll see no content on my website or anything. Yep. So it's about, look after your 150s. Maybe you might even create a product that is only for 150 people. It might not necessarily be for, we're not trying to create New York Times bestsellers and all that stuff. I'm a big fan of keep it tight, keep it intimate, and keep it customer focused. And even talk to your customers. With COVID, I remember I was a bit confused, as we all were with COVID. I was like, okay, all my speaking gigs are gone, all corporate training's gone. And I went, all right, let's go to the 150s and let's ask them, what do you need? What do you need help with? And they all came back. I was going to launch a brand storytelling program. And I just went and asked them, because I was like, well, brand storytelling does come up a lot, but I don't know if that's what they want. I'm not confident. And I've never been in a pandemic. I don't know how people are feeling. So I just went to the 150s and said, what do you need? What can I help with? And what came back, I had the sales training or sales help, like way down the bottom on my list. And I was like, they're not going to say sales. There's so many other people who can teach them sales. They're so not going to pick that. But I'll just put it in and just say, they all said, we need help with sales. And I was like, so I rang one of the people who voted on it and I said, is this right? Like, and I said, but why wouldn't people go work with, there's this person who does sales and this person, and she said, yeah, but we like how you do it. We want to do it how you do it. And I went, oh. So they give you information if you just listen to them and take the time so over time you get better at understanding your customer, you get better at experiments and launching things, and you get better insights that you can help them with. You get deeper insights, deeper expertise, and as a result, that helps them become better too.
There has been a bunch of nuggets all over the place, and I'm mindful of time. We keep it to about the hour window. I've got 2 questions, if I may. The first one is, if you were to leave one nugget that you wanted people just to kind of leave going, okay, thanks, Jane, that's something I need to think about. What might that be? And I didn't, just so everyone knows, I didn't Jane know I was going to do this. So she's going, oh, I've got about 20. Which one? Which one is the one?
Okay. Geez. If I had to leave one thing, would be to have a look at, consider your exceptionality. What is it that makes you unique? And what can you obsess over every day to make it 1% better?
Cool. I think we wrapped 2 in there, kind of, but I think that was cracking though, nonetheless.
I'm pushing the friendship.
Not at all. So it's about what makes you exceptional, and what are and in service to that, where's that 1% improvement? How do you obsess over something and get better and better? Beautiful. Second question is, people love this. They go, gee, this lady's really cool. We'll put a whole, like anything, all the places you can find Jane and information for Jane in the show notes. But just as a conversation, who are you working with right now? Who are the people who are listening kind of go, this is really interesting. I'd like to work with this lady. What's the kind of programs? What's the kind of work you're doing at the moment? Because I know you live by everything you speak.
Yes.
And you're very clear on what you do. You know, if I said, hey, Jane, I'd love to do a productivity program, and you'd go, yeah, that's lovely. There's some people over there.
Yeah.
Who are you working with? What's the work at the moment that you're focusing on?
Yeah, so I spend most of, probably about 70% of my time working with people who are consultants. So people, particularly women who are working with organisations and trying to build their practices. I do some one-on-one coaching with people with people say, I'm not female, will you still work with me? So yeah, I still work with the blokes, so that's all good. So I can do some one-on-one coaching. But the thing that I've been working a lot on is in helping consultants being able to bring in what I call practice in a box. So it's essentially coming in, and I spent 7 years building the systems for my own practice, and we continue to evolve them every day. So practice in a box is where I come in and I set up the entire consulting practice in a day. Every task, if you're speaking at conferences, you're running events, you're running your own events, you're running breakfasts, you're running coaching programs, you're running workshops, public workshops that you have to market, ones in-house, all the tasks. And it's actually about empowering their support to help them so experts can stay in their genius. So yeah, they're the 3 things I'm spending most of my time on.
That's powerful. So I think in there, if you are, when we talk about a practice, it's just another set of words that basically if you're running your own little consulting business, you know, it's often tricky trying to get everything done. That practice in a box it's the word I will use here is it will amplify you massively and allows you to get way more done in that same period of time. So if we talk about better people, better business, it absolutely fits in there, where people will be able to do so much more and open their business up to so much more opportunity if you get these systems in place. And if you try to do it yourself, it's a long road. It's a difficult long road with many hiccups and bumps versus getting someone who's actually refined this and loves this space to help you do it simply and easily. Jane, thank you very much for your time. It's been an absolute delight. There's been so much stuff there, and I'm sure people will revel in the wisdom there. As I said, we'll put how to get in contact with Jane. She's written 9 books, as she said. They're really easy to read. They're not like, you know, I think when we think about books, sometimes we think about these 2-inch thick monsters and there's so much. They're not that. They're whatever the title is, you'll find in Jane's books, they go straight to the conversation and lead you through it in a really measured, accessible way such that you can actually go away and apply stuff.
Yes.
So please, if you see any books that are useful there, buy it, and I know you'll get gold out of them. But thank you again for all your wisdom.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's a pleasure. And for people out there, on behalf of Jan and I, thanks very much for listening or watching, whichever you do. And we'd love to hear any of your comments or feedback. As I said, please, this lady is very worthy of being a fan for and following her work. And again, you can find Jan on pretty much every social media channel. And like I said, we'll add some information below, and you can, become a fan similar to me and watch and learn through her experience and her wisdom.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thanks, everyone, and have a cracking day, whatever it is you're up to. And I hope this has added some value to your day.